Sarah rushed through the glass doors of Financial Tower, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. The morning rain had caught her without an umbrella, and her hair hung in damp strands around her shoulders. She clutched her leather briefcase, knowing she was already 15 minutes late for the quarterly budget meeting. The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 15th floor. Sarah stepped out into the bustling corporate environment of an associates marketing firm, where she worked as a junior account manager. The office buzzed with activity as her colleagues prepared presentations and fielded client calls. "Sarah, there you are," called Jessica Martinez from across the open workspace. Jessica was everything Sarah wished she could be: confident, perfectly groomed, and already climbing the corporate ladder with impressive speed. "Mister was looking for you. The account presentation got moved up." Sarah's stomach dropped. The account was worth $2 million, and she had been working on the campaign strategy for weeks. She nodded quickly and headed toward her cubicle, passing the break room where several colleagues had gathered around the coffee machine. "Did you see that old janitor trying to use the executive elevator again?" laughed a senior account executive known for his expensive suits and condescending attitude. "Security had to redirect him to the service elevator. Some people just don't know their place." The group chuckled, and Sarah felt uncomfortable. She had noticed the older janitor was referring to a quiet man who seemed to work different shifts throughout the building. Unlike the other maintenance staff who wore standard uniforms, this man dressed in simple, clean clothes and carried himself with a dignity that seemed out of place for his position. Sarah grabbed her files and hurried to the conference room, where Mr. waited with 3 potential clients. The presentation went smoothly, and she felt a surge of relief when the clients seemed impressed with her marketing strategy. However, as the meeting concluded, she overheard one of the clients mentioning lunch plans at the expensive French restaurant downtown. "We'd love to continue this conversation over lunch," said the lead client, James himself. "Sarah, you'll join us, of course." Sarah's face flushed. She had exactly $12 in her wallet and wouldn't get paid until next Friday. Her student loans, rent, and recent medical bills had drained her savings account. "I appreciate the invitation, but I have another commitment," she managed to say professionally. Mr.'s expression showed his disappointment, and Sarah knew she had potentially damaged an important business relationship. As the clients left, she retreated to her desk, feeling defeated. Around noon, her stomach growled loudly. She had skipped breakfast to catch an earlier train and now faced the prospect of working through lunch without any money for food. The office cafeteria was expensive, and even the vending machines seemed out of reach. She decided to take a walk outside, hoping the fresh air would distract her from her hunger. The rain had stopped, but gray clouds still hung over the city. As she walked around the building's perimeter, she found herself near the loading dock where delivery trucks brought supplies. That's when she saw him again. The janitor had mocked earlier. He sat alone on a concrete step, unwrapping what appeared to be a simple sandwich from a brown paper bag. His gray hair was neatly combed, and despite his humble work clothes, there was something distinguished about his posture. Sarah noticed he had only half a sandwich and an apple. As she watched, a delivery truck honked loudly, and the janitor quickly moved aside to let the workers pass. He settled on a different step, further from the main walkway, and continued eating quietly. Without thinking, Sarah approached him. "Excuse me," she said softly. "I'm Sarah from the marketing firm upstairs." The man looked up with kind eyes that seemed much younger than his weathered face suggested. "Hello, Sarah, I'm Robert." His voice carried a gentle authority that surprised her. "I noticed you eating lunch alone down here," Sarah continued, feeling slightly foolish. "I was wondering if you'd like some company. I brought extra food today." The lie came easily, motivated by an impulse she couldn't quite explain. Robert smiled warmly. "That's very kind of you, but I don't want to impose." "Not at all," Sarah insisted. She pulled out her phone and quickly ordered 2 sandwiches and drinks from a nearby deli, using her credit card and hoping she wouldn't exceed her limit. "I'll be right back." 20 minutes later, she returned with the food and sat beside Robert on the concrete step. They ate together in comfortable conversation, talking about the weather, the city, and their shared love of old movies. Robert was remarkably well informed about business trends and current events, which seemed unusual for someone in his position. "You know," Robert said thoughtfully, "kindness is becoming rare in places like this." Most people look through workers like me as if we're invisible. Sarah felt a pang of guilt, realizing she had barely noticed the maintenance staff before today. Everyone deserves respect and friendship, she replied simply. As they finished eating, Jessica Martinez appeared around the corner with two other colleagues. They stopped short when they saw Sarah sitting with the janitor, their expressions shifting from surprise to barely concealed disgust. "Sarah, what are you doing?" Jessica asked in a stage whisper loud enough for Robert to hear. "We've been looking everywhere for you." "I'm having lunch," Sarah replied calmly, though her cheeks burned with embarrassment. Appeared behind Jessica, having followed the group outside. "Oh wow, Sarah's making friends with the help," he said mockingly. "That explains why you couldn't afford to join the lunch meeting." The cruel laughter that followed made Sarah's stomach twist, but she noticed Robert remained completely composed, as if he were accustomed to such treatment. "I need to get back to work," Sarah said quietly to Robert, gathering the empty containers. "Thank you for the conversation." "Thank you for the meal and the company," Robert replied with genuine warmth. "It meant more than you know." As Sarah walked back with her colleagues, she endured a constant stream of comments about her charity work and questionable networking strategies. Jessica shook her head in disapproval. "Sarah, you're trying to build a professional reputation here," Jessica said with false concern. "What will clients think if they see you fraternizing with the cleaning staff? You need to be more strategic about your associations." Back at her desk, Sarah tried to focus on her work, but the encounter stayed with her. Something about Robert intrigued her beyond the simple human connection they had shared. There was an intelligence in his eyes and a confidence in his manner that seemed inconsistent with his circumstances. Over the following days, Sarah made it a point to acknowledge Robert whenever she saw him in the hallways, while her colleagues continued to make snide remarks about her friendship with the janitor. She found herself looking forward to their brief conversations. Robert always seemed to be working in different areas of the building, and Sarah began to notice that he paid unusual attention to the executive floors. Unlike other maintenance workers who cleaned quickly and moved on, Robert seemed to observe the business operations with keen interest. One evening, while working late on a presentation, Sarah saw Robert emptying waste baskets on her floor. Most of the office had emptied out for the day, leaving them essentially alone. "Working late again?" Robert asked as he approached her cubicle. "Big presentation tomorrow," Sarah sighed, rubbing her tired eyes. "I'm trying to perfect this campaign strategy for a tech startup. They want something innovative but proven." To her surprise, Robert paused and glanced at her computer screen. "Mind if I take a look? I have some experience with business strategy." Sarah hesitated for a moment, then turned her monitor toward him. Robert studied the presentation quietly, his expression thoughtful and analytical. "This is solid work," he said finally. "But you might consider emphasizing the scalability metrics more prominently. Startups care more about growth potential than immediate returns." His insight was remarkably astute, and Sarah found herself incorporating his suggestions into her presentation. As they talked, Robert demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of market dynamics and consumer psychology that far exceeded what she would have expected. "Where did you learn so much about business?" she asked curiously. Robert smiled mysteriously. "You pick things up over the years. I've been around this building for a long time, watching how successful companies operate." The following morning, Sarah's presentation was a tremendous success. The startup clients were impressed with her strategic insights, particularly her emphasis on scalability and long-term growth potential. Mr. publicly praised her work in front of the entire team. As colleagues congratulated her, Sarah thought about Robert's contribution to her success. She wanted to thank him properly, but realized she didn't even know his full name or how to reach him outside of their chance encounters. During her lunch break, she went looking for him around the building but couldn't find him anywhere. The other maintenance workers she asked claimed they didn't know anyone named Robert who matched his description. "Are you talking about the old guy who works the night shift sometimes?" asked one custodian. "He keeps to himself mostly. I think he does special projects for building management." That afternoon, Sarah overheard talking loudly to a group of colleagues near the water cooler. "I heard that Janitor Sarah's been hanging out with got written up by security," announced gleefully. "Apparently, he was found in areas where he wasn't supposed to be. They're thinking about firing him." Sarah's heart sank. She wondered if Robert had gotten into trouble because of their conversations, particularly the evening when he had helped her with the presentation on the executive floor. She decided to speak with building security to clarify any misunderstanding. At the security desk in the lobby, she asked about Robert and whether there had been any incidents. The security guard looked confused. "Robert, can you describe him more specifically? We have several maintenance workers, but I'm not familiar with that name." Sarah provided a detailed description, and the guard checked his computer system. After several minutes of searching, he looked up with a puzzled expression. "I don't see anyone matching that description in our maintenance staff database," he said slowly. "Are you sure he works for the cleaning company?" A chill ran down Sarah's spine. If Robert wasn't officially employed as a janitor, then who was he and what was he doing in the building? The mystery deepened when she realized that despite their several conversations, she knew almost nothing concrete about his background or personal life. That evening, Sarah stayed late again, hoping to encounter Robert and get answers to her growing questions. The building grew quiet as office workers departed for their homes, leaving only the security staff and the occasional maintenance worker. Around 9 o'clock, she saw a familiar figure walking through the lobby toward the elevators. It was Robert, but something was different about his appearance. His clothes, while still simple, looked more expensive upon closer inspection. His posture seemed more confident, more authoritative. Sarah quickly gathered her things and hurried toward the elevator, hoping to catch him before he disappeared again. As the elevator doors closed, she saw Robert press the button for the penthouse level, floors that housed only the building's most exclusive executive offices. Sarah stared at the elevator's ascending numbers, her mind racing with questions. The penthouse floors were restricted access only, reserved for the most powerful executives in the building. How could Robert, a janitor, have clearance to those levels? Unable to sleep that night, Sarah arrived at work early the next morning, determined to solve the mystery. She spent her coffee break researching the building's directory, looking for any mention of Robert in connection with the companies housed on the upper floors. Financial Tower was home to several major corporations, including investment firms, tech companies, and the headquarters of Industries itself, a massive conglomerate founded decades ago by the late William. The penthouse levels housed the executive offices of Industries, led by the notoriously private CEO who rarely made public appearances. During lunch, Sarah decided to visit the building's management office on the third floor. She approached the receptionist with what she hoped was a casual inquiry. "Hi, I'm Sarah from the marketing firm on 15, she began. "I wanted to thank one of your maintenance workers who helped me last week, but I only know his first name. Robert, older gentleman, gray hair, very professional." The receptionist frowned and typed something into her computer. "I'm sorry, but we don't have any maintenance staff named Robert. All our custodial services are contracted through Clean Corp, and their employees wear uniform shirts with name tags. Are you sure about the name?" Sarah's confusion deepened. She thanked the receptionist and returned to her floor, more puzzled than ever. If Robert wasn't a janitor, then what was he doing in the building dressed like maintenance staff? That afternoon brought an unexpected development. Mr. called Sarah into his office with news that would change everything. "Sarah, I have some remarkable news," Mr. said, barely containing his excitement. "We've just received an inquiry from Industries itself. They're looking for a marketing firm to handle a major campaign, and they specifically requested to meet with you." Sarah's jaw dropped. Industries was the building's primary tenant and one of the most influential companies in the city. Landing them as a client would be a career-defining moment. "Me specifically?" Sarah asked in disbelief. "How do they even know who I am?" Mr. shrugged, clearly as surprised as she was. "The request came directly from their executive office. They want to meet tomorrow at 2 o'clock. This could be the biggest opportunity our firm has ever had." Sarah spent the rest of the day preparing frantically, researching Industries and developing preliminary campaign ideas. The company's portfolio was vast: real estate, technology, renewable energy, and philanthropic initiatives. Their annual revenue was measured in billions, making them one of the most powerful corporations in the region. The next day, Sarah dressed in her best business suit and took the elevator to the 30th floor. The Industries' offices were breathtaking, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, original artwork on the walls, and furnishings that spoke of understated luxury. A professional assistant led Sarah through marble hallways to a conference room where she was told to wait. The room's walls were lined with awards, photos of charitable events, and newspaper clippings documenting the company's community involvement. As she studied these displays, Sarah noticed something that made her heart skip a beat. In several of the older photographs, she recognized a familiar face among the executives. A younger version of Robert stood alongside other business leaders at ribbon-cutting ceremonies and charity galas. Before she could process this discovery fully, the conference room door opened. Sarah turned around and found herself face to face with Robert himself, but he looked completely different. Gone were the simple work clothes and humble demeanor. He wore an impeccably tailored suit, his gray hair perfectly styled, and his presence commanded immediate respect. "Hello, Sarah," he said warmly. "I believe we have some things to discuss." Sarah's legs nearly gave out beneath her. "Robert, I don't understand. What are you doing here? Who are you?" Robert gestured for her to sit down at the polished conference table. "My full name is Robert," he said simply. "I'm the CEO of Industries." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Robert was one of the most successful businessmen in the country, known for his philanthropy and his company's ethical practices. His net worth was estimated in the billions, and he was regularly featured in business magazines as an example of principled leadership. "But I saw you working as a janitor," Sarah stammered. "You were emptying trash cans and eating lunch alone outside." Robert smiled, and Sarah recognized the same kindness she had seen in the man she thought was a custodian. "I do that regularly," he explained. "I spend time working alongside our maintenance staff, security guards, and other employees. It's the only way to truly understand how this building operates and how people are treated." Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process this revelation. "You were testing me." "Not testing," Robert said gently. "Observing. For months, I've watched how employees from various companies in this building treat the support staff. The vast majority ignore us completely or, worse, treat us with disdain. You were the first person to show genuine kindness without any expectation of return." Robert walked to the window and looked out over the city. "When you shared your lunch with me that first day, you didn't know who I was. You saw a person eating alone and decided to offer companionship. That told me more about your character than any resume ever could." Sarah thought about her colleagues' reactions, the mockery she had endured, and how she had defended her choice to befriend someone they considered beneath their notice. "The business advice you gave me," Sarah said slowly. "Your insights about the startup presentation." "Were genuine," Robert confirmed. "I've been in business for over 30 years. I built Industries from a small family company into what it is today. When I saw you struggling with that presentation, I wanted to help. Your success was earned through your own hard work and talent." Robert returned to the table and sat across from Sarah. "I asked for this meeting because Industries is launching a new initiative. We're creating a foundation focused on supporting small businesses and entrepreneurs. We need a marketing partner who understands our values and can authentically represent our mission." Sarah's professional instincts kicked in, even as she struggled with the surreal situation. "What kind of campaign are you envisioning?" "Something that celebrates the dignity of work, regardless of position or title," Robert said. "We want to highlight stories of people who treat others with respect and create opportunities for those who might otherwise be overlooked." As they discussed the potential campaign, Sarah began to understand the full scope of what Robert was offering. This wasn't just a business contract. It was a chance to be part of something meaningful that aligned with her personal values. "There's something else," Robert added. "I've been impressed not only by your kindness but also by your professional capabilities. Your strategic thinking and creative approach have caught my attention. Industries is always looking for talented individuals to join our team." Sarah's head spun. Was Robert offering her a job at one of the most prestigious companies in the city? "I'm not saying you should make any decisions today," Robert continued. "But I wanted you to know that there are opportunities here if you're interested. We value character as much as competence, and you've demonstrated both." The meeting concluded with Robert asking Sarah to develop a comprehensive marketing proposal for the foundation initiative. He handed her a card with his direct contact information, something that would have seemed impossible just hours earlier. As Sarah prepared to leave, she had to ask the question that had been nagging at her. Why do you do it? The disguise working alongside the staff? You're one of the most powerful people in the city. Robert's expression grew thoughtful. Because power without perspective is dangerous. If I only interact with other executives and wealthy investors, I lose touch with the reality most people live. When I'm dressed like a janitor, people reveal their true nature. They show whether they have basic human decency or whether they only respect people who can benefit them. Sarah thought about, and Jessica Martinez, about their cruel laughter and condescending attitudes. She realized that Robert had witnessed the worst behavior from her colleagues and the best from her. "One more thing," Robert said as Sarah reached the door. "What I shared about my identity needs to remain confidential for now. My ability to observe and learn depends on people not recognizing me. I trust your discretion." Sarah nodded solemnly. "Of course, but I have to ask what happens now. How do I explain landing this account to my colleagues?" Robert smiled mysteriously. "Tell them Industries was impressed by your presentation to the startup client. It's not untrue. I was genuinely impressed by your work. Sometimes the best explanations are the simplest ones." As Sarah returned to her floor, her mind was overwhelmed by the day's revelations. The man she had befriended out of simple human kindness was one of the most influential people in the business world. Her small act of sharing lunch had opened doors she never could have imagined. But with this opportunity came new challenges. How would she handle her colleagues' inevitable jealousy and suspicion? How could she work with Robert while keeping his secret? And most importantly, was she ready for the level of responsibility and scrutiny that would come with such a high-profile client? Back at her desk, Sarah tried to appear normal while internally processing everything that had happened. Jessica Martinez approached with obvious curiosity. "How did your meeting go upstairs?" Jessica asked, trying to sound casual. "We heard you were meeting with Industries." "It went well," Sarah replied carefully. "They're interested in our services for a new initiative." Industries had overheard and joined the conversation. "That's impossible. They've never worked with small firms like ours. Are you sure you weren't confused about which company you were meeting with?" Sarah felt a flash of irritation at its condescending tone. "I'm quite sure. They specifically requested our firm based on recent work we've done." As word spread through the office, Sarah found herself the center of attention in a way that felt both exciting and uncomfortable. Mr. was thrilled about the potential account, while her colleagues displayed a mixture of congratulations and barely hidden resentment. That evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at Robert's business card. The events of the past few days felt like a dream, but the evidence was real. She had gone from sharing lunch with a lonely janitor to being personally recruited by one of the most successful businessmen in the country. The irony wasn't lost on her that her colleagues, who had mocked her kindness, and over the next 2 weeks, Sarah threw herself into developing the marketing proposal for Industries. She researched their history, analyzed their current market position, and crafted a campaign strategy that would authentically represent their values while reaching their target audience. The work consumed her evenings and weekends, but Sarah had never felt more motivated. This was her chance to prove herself on the biggest stage possible, working for a client whose personal character she had experienced firsthand. During this time, she occasionally saw Robert in the building, always dressed in his simple work clothes and maintaining his role as a maintenance worker. They would exchange brief nods of acknowledgement, but nothing that would seem unusual to observers. The secret they shared added a surreal dimension to her daily routine. Sarah's colleagues continued to buzz with speculation about how she had landed such a prestigious client. In particular, seemed determined to uncover what he suspected was some kind of deception or mistake. "There's something fishy about this whole situation," told Jessica during a coffee break that Sarah overheard. "Industries doesn't just randomly pick small marketing firms. I think Sarah is exaggerating the scope of their interest." "Maybe she has connections we don't know about," Jessica suggested, though her tone carried skepticism. "What connections could she possibly have?" scoffed. "She can barely afford lunch most days. I bet when push comes to shove, this big opportunity will turn out to be much smaller than she's making it seem." Their doubts motivated Sarah to work even harder on her proposal. She wanted to deliver something so impressive that no one could question her capabilities or suggest she didn't deserve the opportunity. The breakthrough came during a late evening when Sarah was struggling with how to present the campaign's community impact metrics. As she sat in the empty office, she noticed Robert emptying waste baskets on her floor. After making sure they were alone, she quietly approached him. "I could use some advice," she admitted. "I'm having trouble framing the social impact measurements in a way that resonates with business stakeholders." Robert glanced at her computer screen and immediately understood the challenge. "The key is showing how community investment creates sustainable market expansion," he said thoughtfully. "Businesses succeed long-term when the communities around them thrive. Frame it as economic development rather than charity." His insight helped Sarah restructure the entire presentation, transforming it from a traditional marketing proposal into a comprehensive business strategy that aligned profit with social responsibility. 3 days later, Sarah presented her proposal to Robert and two other industries executives in the same penthouse conference room. This time, she was ready for the formal setting and Robert's professional demeanor, though it still felt strange to address him as Mr. The presentation lasted over an hour, with Sarah walking through detailed campaign strategies, budget allocations, and projected outcomes. The other executives asked challenging questions about implementation timelines and success metrics, which Sarah answered with confidence born of thorough preparation. "This is exceptional work," said industry's chief marketing officer. "The strategic thinking is sophisticated and the creative execution feels authentic to our brand values." Robert nodded approvingly. "I'm particularly impressed with how you've integrated community impact with business growth objectives. This approach reflects exactly the kind of partnership we're looking for." When the presentation concluded, excused herself to take a conference call, leaving Sarah alone with Robert for the first time since the initial revelation of his identity. "You've outdone yourself," Robert said warmly. "This proposal demonstrates the strategic thinking and creative vision we need. I'm prepared to move forward with a full partnership agreement." Sarah felt a surge of triumph mixed with disbelief. "Thank you for believing in me," she said. "I know this opportunity came about in an unusual way." "The circumstances were unusual," Robert agreed, "but your capabilities are entirely your own. Don't let anyone suggest otherwise." As they discussed the next steps, Robert brought up something that had been on his mind. "Sarah, I want to offer you something beyond this marketing contract. Industries need someone to lead our new community investment division. The role would involve developing programs that create economic opportunities in areas. Based on what I've seen of your work and your character, I think you'd be perfect for it." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Robert was offering her an executive position at Industries, a leap that would transform her entire career trajectory. "The position comes with significant responsibility," Robert continued. "You'd be managing a multi-million-dollar budget and working directly with community leaders, government officials, and nonprofit organizations. It's challenging work, but it's also an opportunity to make a real difference." "I don't know what to say," Sarah managed. "This is beyond anything I ever imagined." "You don't need to decide today," Robert said. "Take time to consider it, but know that the offer is genuine and based on my confidence in your abilities." When Sarah returned to her office, she was walking on air. The marketing contract alone was a massive victory, but the job offer represented a complete transformation of her life prospects. Mr. was ecstatic when Sarah briefed him on the meeting's outcome. "This is the biggest contract in our firm's history," he announced to the entire office. "Sarah, you've brought us a client that will elevate our entire company's profile." The celebration was somewhat dampened by the obvious resentment from several colleagues, particularly Jessica Martinez. As the office congratulated Sarah, she could see the mixture of disbelief and jealousy in their expressions. "I still don't understand how you made this connection," Jessica said pointedly during the impromptu office gathering. "Industries is known for working with major international agencies. What made them choose our little firm?" Sarah had prepared for this question. "They were impressed by our recent work with innovative startups," she explained, sticking to Robert's suggested explanation. "Sometimes being smaller allows for more personalized attention and creative flexibility." Wasn't satisfied with this explanation. "But how did they even know about our startup work? That campaign hasn't received any major publicity." "Word travels in business circles," Sarah replied diplomatically. "Good work gets noticed." Over the following days, Sarah found herself in an unusual position. Her professional stock had risen dramatically, but she was keeping a massive secret about how it had all come to pass. The contrast between her colleagues' assumptions and the reality of her situation was almost comical. She watched Jessica treat her with newfound respect while continuing to dismiss the maintenance staff as invisible. The irony was profound. They were now deferential to someone whose success had come from showing kindness to the very people they ignored. One afternoon, Sarah witnessed a particularly telling incident. She was walking past the break room when she saw Robert, in his janitor disguise, mopping the floor near the coffee machine. Entered to refill his cup and nearly knocked over Robert's bucket in his hurry. "Watch where you're putting that thing," snapped irritably. "Some of us have real work to do." Robert simply apologized and moved the bucket aside, but Sarah saw the flash of observation in his eyes. He was filing away another example of his character, storing it alongside all the other behavioral data he collected during his anonymous wanderings through the building. That evening, Sarah made her decision about Robert's job offer. She called the direct number he had provided and reached him at his executive office. "Mister, this is Sarah," she said formally, maintaining the professional distance required by his public persona. "I wanted to discuss the position we talked about." "Of course," Robert replied. "Have you had time to consider it?" "I have, and I'm very interested. But I want to understand something first. Why me? There must be dozens of people with more experience who could fill this role." Robert was quiet for a moment before responding. "Experience can be gained, Sarah. Character cannot be taught. I've seen how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. That's the foundation everything else is built on." "I accept," Sarah said simply. "When would you like me to start?" "We'll need to handle this transition carefully," Robert explained. "You'll need to give proper notice to your current firm, and we'll want to announce your hearing in a way that doesn't raise questions about how we identified you as a candidate." They agreed that Sarah would finish the industry's marketing campaign with her current firm, then transition to the new role over the following month. This would provide a natural explanation for how industries had got to know her work quality. As Sarah hung up the phone, she realized that her simple act of kindness had not only changed her own life, but was about to give her the platform to help countless others. The Community Investment Division would focus on creating opportunities for people who, like the maintenance workers she had observed being dismissed, were often overlooked despite their potential. The next morning brought an unexpected complication. Sarah arrived at work to find waiting by her desk with a triumphant expression that made her stomach sink. "Sarah, we need to talk," announced loudly enough for nearby colleagues to hear. "I did some research into industry's hearing practices, and I found some very interesting information about their CEO, Robert." Sarah's blood turned to ice. Had somehow discovered Robert's identity. If his secret was exposed, it would not only end his ability to observe employee behavior, but could also jeopardize the trust he had placed in her. Sarah's heart pounded as stood before her desk, clearly expecting his challenge to expose what he believed was her deception. Several colleagues had gathered around, drawn by the confrontational tone in his voice. "That's a valid question," Sarah replied carefully, buying herself time to think. "Industries operates differently than many companies. Their executive team delegates significant authority to senior staff for initial partnership development." Shook his head smugly. "I called Industries yesterday, Sarah. I spoke with their main reception, and they confirmed that Robert personally approves all major marketing partnerships. So either you're lying about the scope of this contract, or you're claiming to have access to one of the most exclusive executives in the city." Jessica Martinez joined the group, her expression curious but concerned. "Sarah, maybe you misunderstood the level of commitment from Industries. It wouldn't be embarrassing to clarify that it's a smaller project than we initially thought." The implication stung. Her colleagues were offering her an escape route that involved admitting she had exaggerated the importance of the contract. They couldn't conceive that she might actually have the kind of high-level access was describing. Before Sarah could respond, Mr. emerged from his office, drawn by the commotion. "What's going on here?" he asked with concern. Straightened up, clearly relishing his role as the skeptical investigator. "We're just trying to understand the details of Sarah's Industries contract. Based on my research, It seems unlikely that such a major partnership could be developed without direct CEO involvement. Mr. frowned. Sarah, do you need to schedule a meeting with Robert to finalize this contract? Sarah found herself in an impossible position. She couldn't reveal Robert's true identity without betraying his trust, but she also couldn't allow her colleagues to believe she was lying or incompetent. The weight of the secret felt crushing. The executive approval process is more complex than it might appear from the outside, Sarah said diplomatically. Industries has systems in place that allow for thorough evaluation without requiring CEO involvement at every stage. That's not what their receptionist told me, pressed. She specifically said that Robert personally reviews all marketing partnerships worth more than $50,000. So what's the value of your contract, Sarah? The question was a trap. If Sarah revealed the true scope of the contract, worth several $1,000,000, his point about CEO involvement would seem even more valid. But if she downplayed the value, she would be undermining the achievement that had brought her so much recognition. At that moment, salvation came from an unexpected source. The office phone rang, and the receptionist announced over the intercom, "Sarah, you have a call from Industries' executive office." Every head turned toward Sarah's desk. His confident expression faltered slightly as the timing seemed to contradict his narrative. Sarah picked up the phone, hoping desperately that it was Robert and that he could somehow help her navigate this minefield. "Sarah, this is from Industries," came the voice on the other end. "Mr. asked me to call and confirm some details about next week's presentation schedule." Sarah nearly sagged with relief. Was the chief marketing officer who had been present during her proposal presentation. Her call provided perfect cover for the situation. "Of course, Ms." Sarah replied professionally, making sure her voice carried to her gathered colleagues. "I'm available to discuss the schedule whenever is convenient. Mr. wanted me to let you know that he'll be personally attending next Thursday's final presentation," continued, unknowingly providing exactly the validation Sarah needed. "He's very impressed with your work and wants to be present for the contract signing." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for the perfect timing. "Please tell Mr. that I look forward to meeting with him personally," she said, emphasizing the last words for her colleague's benefit. As Sarah concluded the call, she could see confidence evaporating. The phone call from Industries' executive office, mentioning Robert's personal involvement, had undermined his entire argument. "Well," Jessica said slowly, "it sounds like you do have access to their CEO after all." Mr. beamed with pride. "Sarah, this is even more significant than we realized. If Robert is personally attending your presentation, this could establish our firm as a major player in the industry." Struggled to maintain his skeptical stance. "I still think there are questions about how this relationship developed so quickly," he muttered, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. As the group dispersed, Sarah felt both relief and anxiety. She had navigated the immediate crisis, but the pressure was mounting. In 1 week, she would need to deliver a presentation that would satisfy one of the most successful businessmen in the country while maintaining the fiction that she had never met him before. That afternoon, Sarah received a text message from an unknown number. "Coffee shop on 5th Street, 6 p.m. We need to discuss next week. R." She arrived at the small to find Robert already seated in a corner booth, wearing casual civilian clothes that made him look like any other businessman grabbing an evening coffee. This was the first time she had seen him outside of either his janitor disguise or his formal executive attire. "I heard about today's excitement at your office," Robert said with amusement as Sarah sat down. "Mentioned she called at an opportune moment." "You knew what was happening?" Sarah asked in surprise. Robert nodded. "Building security monitors include audio from common areas. When I heard your colleague challenging you, I asked to call with a legitimate update about next week's schedule." Sarah felt a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. "I'm sorry you had to intervene. I didn't know how to handle the situation without betraying your confidence." "You handled it perfectly," Robert assured her. "But this incident illustrates why we need to be careful about next week's presentation. Your colleagues will be watching for any sign that your relationship with Industries isn't what it appears to be." They spent the next hour planning the final presentation. Robert explained that he would need to maintain complete professional distance during the meeting, treating Sarah as if they were meeting for the first time. would handle most of the interaction to minimize the risk of Robert inadvertently revealing their prior relationship. "There's something else we need to address," Robert said as their meeting concluded. "Your colleague has been making inquiries about you and industries. He's persistent and skeptical. We need to be prepared for the possibility that he might attend the presentation or ask detailed questions afterward." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Do you think he suspects something?" "I think he suspects that there's more to the story than you're revealing," Robert replied. "He's not wrong, but he's looking in the wrong direction. He seems to believe you're exaggerating or lying about the contract's importance. He can't conceive that you might actually have earned this opportunity legitimately." As Sarah prepared to leave, Robert brought up one final concern. "After next week's presentation, assuming everything goes well, we'll need to handle your job transition carefully. Your colleagues will be curious about how industries identified you as a candidate for an executive position. We'll need a story that explains your qualifications without raising questions about when and how we evaluated you." The following days passed in a blur of preparation and growing anxiety. Sarah refined her presentation materials while trying to appear normal around colleagues who were watching her every move with curiosity and, in some cases, suspicion. Seemed particularly determined to find inconsistencies in her story. He asked pointed questions about her previous meetings with industries, trying to catch her in contradictory statements. Sarah had to carefully navigate each conversation, providing enough detail to seem credible while avoiding specifics that might reveal the truth. On Wednesday evening, the day before the crucial presentation, Sarah was working late when she encountered Robert making his rounds as a janitor. They were alone in the office corridor, and he paused to offer some final encouragement. "Tomorrow will change everything," he said quietly. "After the presentation, your professional relationship with industries becomes public and official. Are you ready for that level of scrutiny and responsibility?" Sarah nodded, though she felt nervous about the magnitude of what lay ahead. "I keep thinking about how surreal this all is. A few weeks ago, I was struggling to afford lunch. Now I'm about to become an executive at one of the most respected companies in the city." "Success often comes suddenly after long preparation," Robert observed. "You've been preparing for this opportunity your entire career, even if you didn't realize it. Tomorrow is just the moment when preparation meets opportunity." As Robert continued his janitorial duties and Sarah returned to her desk, she reflected on the profound irony of her situation. Her colleagues saw Robert as an invisible service worker while treating her with newfound respect. They had no idea that the man they dismissed was the architect of her transformation. The next morning, Sarah arrived at the office early to make final preparations for the presentation. She wore her most professional suit and carried herself with confidence that was only partially feigned. Whatever happened in the next few hours would determine not only her career trajectory, but also whether she could successfully guard the secret that had made it all possible. At 1:30 p.m., an hour before the scheduled meeting, Sarah gathered her presentation materials and headed toward the elevator. Several colleagues, including Jessica Martinez, wished her luck with expressions that ranged from genuine support to poorly concealed skepticism. The industry's conference room buzzed with nervous energy as Sarah set up her presentation materials. Mr. had insisted on attending the meeting personally, bringing along as a senior account executive and Jessica Martinez to take notes. Their presence added pressure to an already challenging situation. Greeted the group professionally and explained that Mr. would join them shortly. Sarah forced herself to appear calm while internally preparing for the most difficult performance of her life. When Robert entered the conference room, Sarah was struck again by his commanding presence in executive attire. Gone was any trace of the humble janitor she had befriended. This was one of the most powerful businessmen in the city, and she would have to pretend they had never met. "Mr., thank you for taking time to meet with us personally," Mr. said, clearly intimidated by the presence of such a high-profile executive. Robert's eyes briefly met Sarah's with no hint of recognition. "I make it a point to personally evaluate all significant partnerships," he replied. "Ms.'s proposal has generated considerable interest within our organization." Leaned forward slightly, studying Robert's demeanor for any sign of prior familiarity with Sarah. Sarah could feel his scrutiny and focused on maintaining professional composure. "Ms., please proceed with your presentation," Robert said formally. For the next 45 minutes, Sarah delivered her proposal with precision and confidence. She outlined the campaign strategy, detailed the budget allocation, and presented projected outcomes with the thoroughness of someone who had spent weeks perfecting every element. Robert asked challenging questions that demonstrated his business acumen while maintaining complete professional distance. Sarah answered each inquiry with expertise, drawing on insights he had actually provided during their private conversations, but presenting them as her own analysis. "Your approach to community engagement is particularly sophisticated," Robert observed at one point. "How did you develop this understanding of how social impact initiatives can drive business growth?" Sarah had prepared for this question. "I've studied successful companies that have integrated social responsibility into their core business strategy. The most effective approaches treat community investment as economic development rather than traditional charity." Interrupted with a pointed question. "Ms., this level of strategic thinking seems quite advanced for someone at your career stage. Have you worked on similar large-scale campaigns before?" The challenge was clear, and Sarah felt her colleagues' attention sharpen. "Every professional grows through taking on new challenges," she replied calmly. "My previous work with innovative startups taught me to think strategically about scalable solutions. Those principles apply whether you're working with a small tech company or a major corporation." Nodded approvingly. "We were impressed by exactly that kind of strategic thinking when we reviewed your portfolio." After the presentation concluded, Robert addressed the group with formal authority. "This proposal represents exactly the kind of partnership industry seeks. Ms. has demonstrated both creative vision and practical business sense. We're prepared to move forward with a comprehensive contract." Mr. could barely contain his excitement. "This is wonderful news, Mr. Sarah has been instrumental in developing this proposal." "I can see that," Robert replied. "In fact, Ms.'s capabilities have impressed us sufficiently that we'd like to discuss additional opportunities. Industries is expanding our community investment initiatives, and we're looking for someone with the right combination of strategic thinking and genuine commitment to social impact." Sarah's pulse quickened. This was the moment when Robert would reveal the job offer, but he needed to frame it in a way that wouldn't arouse suspicion about their prior relationship. "Are you suggesting a consulting role?" Mr. asked hopefully, clearly envisioning additional revenue for his firm. "Actually, we're considering Ms. for a permanent executive position leading our new community investment division," Robert said directly. "The role would involve managing significant resources and working closely with our senior leadership team." The silence that followed was profound. His jaw literally dropped, while Jessica Martinez stared at Sarah with undisguised shock. Mr. looked as though he couldn't process what he had just heard. "An executive position?" finally managed. "Mr., with all due respect, Sarah has been a junior account manager for less than 2 years. Don't you think such a significant role requires more extensive experience?" Robert's expression remained neutral, but Sarah detected a slight cooling in his demeanor toward. "Mr., isn't it? I've been evaluating talent for over 30 years. Experience is valuable, but character and capability are more important. Ms. has demonstrated both." "But how can you evaluate her character from one presentation?" Pressed, clearly unable to accept that Sarah could legitimately earn such an extraordinary opportunity. "This presentation is just one data point," Robert replied evenly. "We've conducted thorough research into Ms.'s professional background and personal character. Industries doesn't make hearing decisions lightly." Smoothly intervened to prevent further challenges from. "Perhaps we should discuss the timeline for both the marketing contract and the potential position," she suggested. Over the next 30 minutes, they worked out the practical details. The marketing contract would begin immediately, with Sarah's current firm handling the initial campaign implementation. If Sarah chose to accept the executive position, she would transition to Industries after completing her obligations to her current employer. As the meeting concluded, Robert shook hands with each team member. When he reached Sarah, his grip was firm and professional, showing no trace of their personal connection. "Ms., I look forward to working with you," he said formally. "I believe you'll find Industries an environment where talent and integrity are properly valued." The message was clear to everyone in the room. Robert personally valued Sarah's capabilities and character. Any further questioning of her qualifications would essentially challenge his judgment. During the elevator ride back to their floor, Sarah's colleagues struggled to process what had just happened. Mr. was ecstatic about both the marketing contract and the prestige of having one of his employees recruited by Industries. However, seemed disturbed by developments he couldn't fully understand. "I still don't get it," muttered as they returned to the office. "How does someone go from junior account manager to executive recruit in one presentation?" "Maybe Sarah's just more talented than you realized," Jessica suggested, though her tone carried its own note of bewilderment. Over the following days, news of Sarah's success spread throughout the building. The marketing contract with Industries elevated the entire firm's profile, while Sarah's job offer became the subject of intense speculation and gossip. Some colleagues were genuinely happy for her success, but others struggled with feelings of jealousy and confusion. The speed and magnitude of Sarah's transformation seemed to defy conventional career progression, leading to various theories about how she had achieved such remarkable results. Remained particularly skeptical, though he could no longer openly challenge Sarah's claims without contradicting Robert's public endorsement. Instead, he began spreading subtle suggestions that there must be more to the story than Sarah was revealing. "I'm not saying Sarah did anything wrong," told anyone who would listen. "But successful people like Robert don't usually make such significant hearing decisions based on one meeting. There has to be some connection or background we don't know about." His suspicions weren't entirely wrong, but his assumptions about the nature of that connection were completely misguided. He imagined family connections, romantic involvement, or some form of professional networking that Sarah was hiding. The truth, that her opportunity had come from showing kindness to someone she thought was a janitor, was beyond his conception. 2 weeks later, Sarah gave her official notice to Mr. The transition was handled gracefully, with Industries providing a public explanation that they had been impressed by Sarah's strategic work on their marketing campaign and had identified her as an ideal candidate for their expanding community initiatives. On Sarah's last day at the marketing firm, her colleagues threw a small farewell party in the office break room. The celebration was bittersweet, marking both Sarah's success and the end of relationships she had valued despite their recent complications. As the party wound down, Sarah found herself alone with near the elevator bank. His earlier hostility had given way to grudging curiosity. "Sarah, can I ask you something?" said quietly. "How did you really make this happen? I've been in this business for 8 years and I've never seen anything like your trajectory." Sarah looked at thoughtfully, remembering all the times she had watched him treat service workers with dismissive rudeness. She thought about Robert's observations of human character and the importance of basic human decency. "The secret is simpler than you think," she replied gently. "Success often comes from treating everyone with respect and kindness, regardless of their position or what they can do for you. You never know who might be watching or what opportunities might arise from simply being a good person." Frowned, clearly expecting a more concrete explanation involving networking strategies or business connections. "That's it, just being nice to people." "Just being nice to people," Sarah confirmed, knowing he would never understand the profound truth of that statement. As the elevator doors closed and Sarah descended toward the lobby for the last time as an employee of the marketing firm, she reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. Her simple act of sharing lunch with a lonely janitor had opened doors she never could have imagined, leading to opportunities that would allow her to help countless others. The following Monday, Sarah began her new role as Director of Community Investment at Industries. Her office was on the 28th floor, with a view of the city that reminded her daily of how far she had traveled from her humble beginnings. Robert, now officially her boss, maintained appropriate professional distance while providing the guidance and support she needed to succeed in her new role. Their secret remained safe, known only to them and serving as a foundation of mutual trust and respect. In the months that followed, Sarah's work at Industries flourished. The Community Investment Division launched programs that created job training opportunities, supported small businesses in areas, and partnered with local organizations to address economic inequality. Every day, as Sarah walked through the Industries offices, she remembered the lesson that had changed her life. The true measure of a person's character is revealed in how they treat those who seem to have nothing to offer in return. And sometimes, late in the evening when the executive floors grew quiet, Sarah would see Robert in his simple work clothes, continuing his observations of human behavior throughout the building. The powerful CEO who valued character above all else, ensuring that kindness and integrity remained at the heart of everything Industries represented. The janitor who had become a billionaire, and the young woman who learned that genuine success comes not from stepping on others to climb higher, but from reaching down to lift others up along the way. As the elevator doors closed, Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to face the performance of her lifetime. In 30 minutes, she would sit across from Robert and pretend they were meeting for the first time, while her colleagues watched for any sign that her remarkable opportunity was anything other than what it appeared to be. I found out that Robert is known for personally vetting every major business partnership, continued with obvious satisfaction. He never delegates important decisions and always meets potential partners himself. So I'm wondering, Sarah, if Industries is such a big client, where exactly is your meeting with the actual CEO? Ted, it was professionally damaging, would now have to watch as that same kindness led to the biggest opportunity of her career. The mystery of Robert's true identity was about to unfold in ways Sarah could never have imagined.